Khaliq Ebrahim Allie, the first Deputy President of the Muslim Judicial Council of South Africa, to lead us in this discussion. We will discuss the place and value of ethics in our contemporary world and how a nation such as ours goes about negotiating a shared ethical code. This webinar takes the shape of a roundtable dialogue to allow both panelists to ask one another questions, have a dialogue, have a conversation, should they wish to do so. Furthermore, our viewers who may wish to pose further questions during these proceedings can do so using our chat function. For members of the media who are joining us this evening, a high-resolution recording of these proceedings can be made available upon request. And now, without further ado, I invite the President of Action SA and convener of the webinar series, Mr. Herman Mashaba, to start us off by delivering his opening remarks. Mr. Mashaba, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lerato, and good evening, South Africa, and thank you to all of you who are joining us this special evening. A special word of welcome, particularly to Moulana Abdul, Khaliq, Ebrahim, Allie, First Deputy President of the Muslim Judicial Council of South Africa. I appreciate you making the time, to joining us this evening. Last week, South African Action SA launched a series of webinars devoted to the topic of ethical leadership in South Africa. We did so out of the belief that now, more than ever, we need to foster a culture of ethical leadership in our society, and we want to see in our country succeed. South Africa is being held back by unethical leaders and unqualified public servants. Our current leadership crisis has manifested itself through rampant corruption, cronyism, nepotism, and illogical cadre deployment that have crippled our country's public service. State capture, the looting of public resources, and the normalization of public sector corruption have diverted funds away from efforts to address the legacy of our unjust past. This has had to change in order for us to make progress as a nation. Rebuilding ethical leadership in South Africa must be central to the project to fix our broken country South Africa, that we so much love. That is why Action SA is committed to ethical leadership as one of our core values. And this is why we appointed an independent chief leadership officer to ensure that we embody this value as an organization. In fact, just last night, exactly at this time, we inducted the first group of Action SA volunteers into our Action Leadership Program. This initiative will focus on the development of our leaders to prepare them to govern following the local government election later this year. Against this context, the series of webinars devoted to ethical leadership is serving to engage the representatives of the major faiths in South Africa to explore the role that religion can play in promoting a culture of ethical leadership. This is not to suggest that ethical leadership is the sole domain of religion, but rather in recognition of the role played by religious beliefs as a guiding light in the lives of so many South Africans. Importantly, the purpose of the series is to demonstrate that as much as we may differ on theological grounds, the concept of ethics and morality transcend these differences. Indeed, there's more that unites us than there is that divides us. Over the course of my lifetime, I've had the opportunity to engage with members of all major faiths in South Africa. While I'm a Christian, I have accompanied my business associates to mosques and shared dinner with my family doctors on the Sabbath. These engagements and many others I've been fortunate to share with those of different faiths have demonstrated to me that as much as there are fundamental differences in what we believe, we also share many similarities. The similarities are what we want to explore over the coming weeks as we delve into the issue of how we can rebuild ethical leadership in our society and country. At the end of the series, our independent Chief Leadership Officer, Mr. Adrian Groenewald, will be hosting a webinar to reflect on the series and explore the role of civil society in fostering ethical leadership in a broader societal context. Our aim is to remind South Africans that what all of us said and done, the vast majority of us are good, law-abiding people that we want to see our country work. We must all of us act as one to build an inclusive, prosperous future for all South Africans. On that note, Derato, I'd like to hand back to you to facilitate the rest of the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mashaba. Those are most welcome opening remarks and quite precise and quite to the point and very clear. Thank you very much for those remarks. And now I invite our honored guest, Moulana Abdul Khaliq Ebrahim Allie, to give us his opening remarks.
Good evening, Lerato. Good evening, Mr. Mashaba and fellow South Africans. I greet you with the universal greetings of peace, love, and mercy. The meaning of Islam is peace and to surrender to the Almighty Allah, the creator of all of us. And so I greet you with that universal greetings of submission to the Almighty, who has blessed us this evening to have entered into a very critical and important and much needed discussion. I thank you. I thank you for the opportunity and for creating the necessary platform where faith leaders can be able to come out and where we can be able to share our thoughts and our views and be able to enter into the discussion because it is so much needed. With those opening remarks, we pray that Almighty Allah and the God Almighty bless us in our deliberations and that good will flow from our deliberations and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moulana. Mr. Mashaba, if you don't mind, I'm going to kick this one off. Moulana, for the benefit of all of our citizens, of all South Africans who may not be of a Muslim background, a Muslim persuasion from a faith perspective, what does Moulana mean?
I would like to say, you know, Islam is a complete code of life. It covers every aspect and facet of our lives. It governs our private domain, our domestic sphere. It governs our business. It covers our social responsibility. And likewise, Islam guides us in terms of our collective responsibility that we have. If Islam governs every facet of our lives, it is most certainly would guide us in terms of our political sphere of life as well. If religion covers our spiritual dimension, we know the political sphere of our lives guide us in terms of our collective responsibility as a nation and as a people. Islam teaches us about politics. Politics is not devoid of religion, and neither is religion devoid of how to govern, how to administer, how to be able to be of services to our fellow human beings and to humanity at large. And hence, the fact of the matter is that in the public interest, Islam teaches us about justice and compassion. And in short, politics cannot be separated from the Islamic viewpoint.
Oh, I'm writing away because I wanted you to, you touched on something that I did want to ask, the idea of mixing up, you know, almost church and state. And I think you've answered that very clearly in the statement you've just made now. Here's the question. What does Islam say about politics and leadership in the political space?
So, Islam being a complete code of life, and it governs our lives and all our spheres of lives. When we speak about politics, the definition of politics being the fact that somebody is being placed in a position where he or she would be in a leadership position of responsibility, and being in a position of being in a position of responsibility, there is the duty where the best services must be able to be rendered for those whom that particular individual serve. And it is a matter of moving away from selfishness to selflessness. It is meant to be able to move away from our self-interest to that of the interest of those that are following us. A leader is accountable. First and foremost, by Islam, Islam teaches us that our accountability is first and foremost to the Almighty Allah, whom has positioned or placed that particular person in that particular position of governance. He or she cannot be isolated from not being accountable to the Almighty Allah. When a person is in that particular position, then the reality is that we must be able to know that no one is seeing me fulfilling my obligation, but the Almighty Allah is always ever seeing.
You're touching on something quite important, and I'm going to ask this semi-final one from my side, and then I will hand over to Mr. Mashaba to engage you. If you are talking about, and this is the reason why these webinar series have become so important, that we even engaged or started to put them together, was around the idea that us as citizens of South Africa, having realized or seen that we have veered off from all these things that you have mentioned. We have veered off from being selfless to being selfish. We have veered off from the national interest to self-interest. And you mentioned accountability being the ability to do something even when nobody is looking. And that speaks to a person's character. In a case where a person fails to behave in the manner in which is they accountable, in this case, we're speaking about being accountable over and above all to Allah. What happens? How do we deal with a person who has demonstrated, and I don't want to say failure, but shortcomings in that way? How does Islam provide or suggest we deal with a person in that position?
So let us face the reality. I mean, in what you refer to in our beautiful rainbow nation, and veered off from a pathway that has been laid down with hardships and many, many challenges and great sacrifices that were made, and with the hope and aspirations for a beautiful country of equality, of a beautiful country where we can be able to share in the richness of our beautiful land. Now, the fact of the matter is, when a person is being placed in a position, what we call as amana and trust, then his accountability is to the Almighty Allah, and there must be fear in that particular regard, but then there's also an accountability to the masses. A person does not arrive at a position of being a leader without also being nominated or being placed in that particular position of being a leader. And so there must be accountability equally to the masses that he serves. And so hence there's a duty and responsibility upon the masses, where a masses must be able to say that we are seeing an injustice system, or we are experiencing levels of corruption. And so in a very organized, in a very dignified, in a very respectable way, there must be the voices being raised. And that's the reason why I believe such a platform that you have created here is to be heard, or rather for the faith leaders to be standing up. Faith and the faith communities have an equal responsibility to stand up against all forms of corruption, not only corruption that is being perpetrated within government circles or government departments, but also in the corporate world or in all forms of governance where we see there is some extent of levels of corruption taking place. And so our duty and responsibility is to call up or to call out those particular people or individuals, and to so that people can be brought to book.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Mashaba.
Yeah, thank you very much, Moulana and Lorato. Let me, Moulana, just come in here. You brought in something that I was going to raise with you, because we talk about, to a large extent, on ethical leadership, but obviously leadership without the masses, you cannot just really have a leader. In our context, the South African context, what role do you believe society also has to really play in ensuring that they hold the leadership accountable? Do we have the space, or do we submit to whatever the leader does, or do we have certain responsibilities to ensure that we hold this accountable from a Islamic perspective, but taking South Africa into context, because we live in a democratic, we are lucky we live in a democratic space where we've got certain responsibilities. What do you think the role of religion can actually play in from an Islamic perspective?
You know, let me take you to the history of Islam. And that speaks about the noble Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Now, he is a brother of all the noble prophets that God Almighty has sent as guardians over the well-being of humanity, as guidance for humanity. And that is where, when we speak about Islam and the Muslim role in terms of politics or all our spheres of life, then we will be able to go to that particular area where we will find our guidance. And so when we look at the life of the Prophet, then he has laid down very clear, demonstrative guidance in terms of leadership. And in that particular leadership, he was open. He was open for listening to his followers. He engaged them. They knew that he is the messenger of God. He's the followers of his. But there was an openness, there was a frankness, there was a climate where his companions were able to engage with him in terms of the decision or position that he has taken. And I think that sets the trend for when you are a leader, then you must be able to be knowing that you are accountable to the Almighty, but you're also equally accountable to your followers and to your companions and to your masses. And so, having said that, I would like to quote to you the beautiful quotation after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. The first Khalif, the first leader of the Muslim community, his name was Abu Bakr, and we say, may God be pleased with him. He quoted at the point, now that was a very critical time in Islam, a very sensitive time. It was a very painful time where the companions had to bury the Prophet, and now they've got a new leader. So what is the words of that particular leader? Right, his very first address to his message, and let me quote what Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala said. He said, so when he was elected after the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he gave the famous speech and he said, I am elected not because I am the best of you. If I do my job thoroughly, follow me and help me. And if I deviate from the path, from the right path to corruption, bring me back to the right path. Those were some of his opening remarks, which for subsequent leaders to come, and including myself as a leader, we are held to account by those very foundation that has been set by Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala an, to be said that, listen, help me if we are on a path of righteousness. But if we deviate in any way for that matter, then my messes, my followers have a duty and responsibility, and I should not be arrogant. A leader must be humble. The greatest of leaders, and here I'm talking about the noble prophets, and then the subsequent leaders in Islam, they were servants of humanity. They did not serve their own interests or their pockets. And so the reality is that he laid down a foundation to be saying that, listen, help me back on the path. And there must be open space where masses must be able to engage. And in our South African context, we have such opportunities. And frank discussions are required where these levels of engagements must be intensified.
Moulana,
Go ahead, Mr. Masha.
No, thank you, Lerato. Moulana, for me, as an individual, as a South African, born half of my life, lived under the evil system of apartheid. And 1994 came and we had this miracle of a rainbow nation that you referred to earlier on. And obviously living under the evil system of apartheid, which was very oppressive. So people had no voice, had no leadership. And obviously, with the birth of the new dispensation, I was under the impression that South Africans will be free to choose their leaders, they'll be free to express their feelings, they'll be able to improve their lives and see a prosperous, inclusive the nation. But I'm actually seeing a reverse where civil society has decided to actually hold back, more especially religious leadership. Religious leadership plays such a crucial role with the dismantling of the apartheid regime. And lately, over the years, people decided to actually hold back. To that, as Lerato mentioned earlier on, is there the role for religious leadership to play in actually guiding civil society to really get back into taking responsibility for the future of their country and the future of their children?
Indeed. I personally believe when I study the dismantling of the evil apartheid system, then when we see Archbishop Desmond Tutu walking hand in hand with Sheikh Nadir Muhammad, the Muslim leader, and Dr. Ellen Busak and others, it was a collective faith leadership that stood firm and strong against the evil of apartheid. It stood firm against that which were immoral and which were destructive to the well-being of humanity and society. If 26 years down the line in our democracy, we are experiencing some or one or other form of a system which is destructive to our very fundamental or core principles of our country, then the demand would be that faith leaders and the faith community must be able to take hands, and we must be able to stand together, and we must be able to raise our voices, because that is our religious obligation and our religious responsibility. So the Muslim community, 2019, we joined Archbishop Thabo Makgoba in terms of the orange, what was that now? Overalls, and making a statement to say that we cannot allow an individual or a system to hijack what the forefathers has intended for our people. And so civil society must be equally be guided. And I said it in one of our webinars to say that our pulpits must vibrate with ethical leadership. Our pulpits must be able to be heard speaking against that which is corruption in our country.
Sure, that's so loaded. Moulana, you know, when we think of the prophets, as you have alluded to earlier, we think of the prophets as very pious people, and sometimes it seems like it's out there somewhere. When a layman, regular person, El Rato, walks into a space of leadership, I mean, I think fundamentally most people are good. You know, they walk into these spaces, they're not necessarily intending any harm. What is your suggestion? You are put into a space to lead people. Do you have, or does Islam perhaps have guidance around, you know, what should you be aware of? What are some of the to-dos to remind yourself as to why you took up the position in the first place, so that when you begin to be tested in particular ways, and I'm thinking right now of, you know, the people who have been marred under the cloud of corruption. I think some of them really just didn't go into it thinking that this was going to happen to them. Does Islam offer us any guidance for leaders who find themselves caught up in spaces that could potentially be enticing for them to give up their piety or give up their righteous the roles that they've been elected into?
Indeed. So the fact of the matter is that a leader, when we are being placed in a position of leadership, we've spoken about accountability. We speak about the importance of ethical leadership. Now, the need to be honest, the need to be trustworthy, the need for truthfulness, the need where we must be able to stand up for justice, the need for us to take good care of the vulnerable and those who are the downtrodden in our community and society. When we think in terms of the South African context, where we have come from, where majority of our people were placed under oppression, it is those particular oppressed people that must be given what we say in Islam, their haqq and their due. It is the leader must be able to, and so when we think in terms of you speaking about, you know, earlier on you made mention about the prophets and the pious space and all of those particular dimensions. A person need not to be pious to fulfill our obligation and duty and responsibility that we have undertaken. We have to stand for the well-being of community and society. We, being in a leadership position, we have the duty and the responsibility to identify the critical issues. And hence, that's the reason why, you know, it is so important and necessary for us to reflect and ponder all the time, to sit down and to be able to have our consultative forums where we are being brought to book and where we are being brought aligned to say that, listen, we have to refocus, reset, and be brought to a point to identify what are the priority list and what are the critical issues for us to speak about. Now, I may be asking you, I mean, what do you identify as the most important and critical areas that we should be wanting from that particular leader that we have placed in that particular position?
How do we guard against societal fatigue, right? And I hear you speaking to us about the fact that, you know, leaders are supposed to serve society, and society needs to also take up its place and play its part in holding the leaders accountable. Yes, we have Allah, who's the paramount authority when it comes to being accountable, but we don't see Allah. We see the works of the people. We see how the people are being treated and how the people are receiving the same leaders. And so we see Allah through the people. How do we help society? And I'm thinking here about, and I hear this all of the time, where people are saying, it is the rich, it is the powerful, it is the powerful, you know, politicians are too powerful. What can we do? Whether you exercise your voice or not, you know, it's not going to be heard. The same is going to continue to happen. The same is going to continue to be done by the same leaders. You know, how do we re-empower? And I'm talking here in the context of our country. And of course, there are other examples around the world where people are in the same space as we are as South Africans. How do we re-empower society to hold our leaders accountable in the ways that you have articulated?
So, you know, we are in our democracy, we have space. Comparative with many other countries, we have the space where we can be able to raise our voices. And the reality is more important, or rather more powerful than any politician, is the power of the people. The power is with the masses. And when we speak about societal fatigue, it is important that we measure the performance or the underperformance or the climate on the ground where people are facing challenges. We measure that with the performance of a politician or a person that sits in that public space. And hence, it is important to constantly bring and come back to our support base. And the people that have placed you in that particular position, no leader, either being nominated, elected, and been placed in a position, can ever be isolated from those who have placed him or her in that particular position of being a public servant. And so when we speak about accountability, we equally speak about accountability to our masses. And I mean, if you think in terms of in the South African context, I mean, it's very painful to think South Africa is the most unequal society in the world. The divide between the haves and the have-nots forever. And I mean, recently I saw now the unemployment rate in our country and unemployment rate amongst the youth. So you can understand there is almost an apathy that sets in the community and society. But that is where courage comes from. Courage is a very significant characteristic that where the masses must be able to understand, build your courage. There's avenues that we must be able to channel that particular power of ours. And then we must be able to say that, listen, what we're experiencing on the ground is not what was intended by the founding fathers. And so this is where I believe even the faith and our churches and our mosques and the synagogues, and we all have got our fundamental role to play in this particular regard.
Sorry, Mr. Mashaba, just 1 second, Mr. Mashaba, before I let you come in. I do want to remind our viewers that should they have any questions, they may do so using the chat function, and I will ask their questions, those questions on their behalf. So just to remind our viewers that, you know, this is not a three-way conversation. It is inclusive of them too. Mr. Mashaba, you may go ahead.
Yes, Moulana, yeah, thank you, Lerato. Moulana, you brought in a very important practical lived experience of South Africans. We're the most unequal society in the world, and we are more unequal today than we were in 1994. We are the less educated people in the world than we were prior to 1994. Yesterday, Stats SA just gave us unemployment numbers, sitting at just over 42% of our people are unemployed. But at the same time, Moulana, in 2019, we had national elections. South African voting population, what, 35, 36 million. Only 17.6 million people turned up to vote. 18.3 million South Africans said to themselves, this has got nothing to do with me. Yes, I'm unhappy, but I'm actually divorcing myself from participation because I'm an individual. My vote is not going to count. What can actually the religion actually play in getting this 18 million South Africans to actually understand that they are actually responsible for the current situation that we are sitting at? Because if we are not going to hold our leaders accountable, unfortunately, we're going to end up with the statistics that you and I just already mentioned, which are embarrassing to me as a South African. Someone sent me a clip, a video clip earlier on in one of this fast food outlet that they were looking for just one person to work there. I don't know how many thousands of people turned up for this job. I remember when on many occasions during my time as an employer, every time you've got a vacancy for 1 or 2 people, you end up with thousands and thousands of applications. But at the end of the day, society keeps on saying to themselves, I'm an individual, I'm a nobody. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no individual anywhere in the world who's nobody. You can be a billionaire, you can be someone unemployed, but at the end of the day, as human beings, I believe in equality, that we are equal, more especially equal in the eyes of Allah or God. But how do we then get human beings to actually value themselves? Because people who actually benefit out of this would always prefer to really keep these people ignorant and obviously to really destroy their self-esteem and dignity. What role can we play, get the faith leaders to play in actually empowering individuals to understand that they're as powerful as anyone else?
So, you know, my first thought that comes to my mind, Dr. Mashaba, is every individual must embrace that I am South Africa. I must be able to embrace the fact that I am, as a citizen in this country, I do have, in our democratic process, I have the opportunity to make a difference. Every drop of water fills the bucket. And hence, our masses must be able to understand that when it comes to elections, it affords us the opportunity to make our mark and to be able to say that is very powerful, the cross that I'm placing there. There is, so when we say that what role do the faith communities play, the realities that plays itself out on the ground, that particular reality, people live those particular realities. When earlier on, when we spoke about there's an apathy in community and society, we all in the Quran, one of the important lessons that we have been sent to the world is to enjoin towards good and righteous, and to forbid that which is unlawful and which is destructive. It becomes every individual's responsibility, when we see right, to support right. When we see wrong, to take the responsibility and the courage and to be able to say, I distant or disagree with the wrong that I witness. We have a collective responsibility, and likewise we have an individual responsibility. That individual responsibility is what Allah has placed upon us. So when the noble Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he says, "Kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyati," each and every one of you are like a shepherd. You are answerable for your flock. The church leader has accountability to his. He's been placed as a church leader. I've been placed as an imam in my mosque. I must be able to speak the word of justice. I must be able to speak the word of truth. And I must be able to speak the word that is in the well-being of community and society. And likewise, that should be able to translate back to my audience in my church or in my mosque, that must be able to take that particular message to my table, to my sitting with my family, and to be able to say, would we want to see the downslide? Do we agree with the downslide? If today 5 people go in, and I mean 500 people go and sleep without food this evening, is that acceptable to me? It cannot be acceptable to me. Islam teaches us that I cannot go to bed with a stomach full if my neighbor go and sleep hungry. Now, if I know that today there's 500 people that go and sleep hungry, if I don't address and rescue the situation, tomorrow there will be 700 people. How do I change that particular dynamics? By me standing up and be able to say, what is my responsibility? What is my individual responsibility? What is my personal duty that I have to changing that particular 500 to making it 400? And so it is, and this is what we are saying to the viewers this evening here. South Africa, you are South Africa, and South Africa belongs to you. I have an individual responsibility towards my rainbow nation to make it a better place for all South Africans.
What I find interesting, Moulana and Lerato and the viewers out there, how the societal moral compass has degenerated over the years since 1994, where we see the vulnerability and gullibility of our people, where they follow certain faith-based or religious leaders who does things that not even someone who does not believe in God or Allah. How do we allow things like this to really happen? I mean, let's really be honest with ourselves, because the truth is what's going to really set us free. Look at this recent case of Prophet, they call him Prophet Bashir. I mean, it becomes really very difficult, because let's say if faith-based or leadership, true leadership, is going to keep quiet when things like this happen. Then what happens? People then obviously will end up people no longer believing in you as genuine, credible leaders, because this is what has happened in the political field. Because people don't participate in political activity because they are saying, no, all politicians are corrupt or that untrustworthy. But now it can happen, it is happening in the religious field as well, where now people will end up saying, you know what, what's the point of me going to mosque? What's the point of me going to church? Or what's the point of me going to any place where religious leaders are going to mislead us and abuse us? So these are challenges that we are seeing as faith-based leadership. What, I mean, is there any responsibility on your part to obviously raise those issues? Because the problem is not only coming from failure of political leadership, it also really has, let's look at ourselves as civil society, because we spoke a lot about the role of civil society. We spoke a lot about the role of political leadership. Now, what about the role of faith-based leadership, religious leadership, like yourself and others? Because we've got bad apples that might, unfortunately, destroy the credibility and the crucial role that you have got to play.
So, Moulana, yes. You know, Mr. Mashaba has extraordinary ability to load you, as he just has demonstrated that he has. I think where we are now is to ask the question, just to sum up what he said, because he also preempted my thinking as well. Where did we go wrong? And I mean, we've got, the last 15 minutes. I would like us to just talk about, so that those who are watching can have a sense,
Ratu, I missed you there. My apologies.
No, I was just saying that I think what the gist of Mr. Mashaba's statement, I want us to be able to take South Africans with us on this journey to say, one, in the last 15 minutes or less, one, where did we go wrong? And how do we get it back? How do we come back? Because I don't think anyone in South Africa at this point in time can deny that we have veered off course from a society that we had aspired to be to where we find ourselves now. I don't think anyone anymore can deny that we are off course. Where do you believe we went wrong? And how can, not just the faith-based, but I want us to capture this idea from Islam's guidance around how do we get back on track?
Yeah, so my apologies. So in the few minutes that we have, we would like to appeal to South Africans that we have a moral responsibility and a collective responsibility. Likewise, a religious duty and responsibility to the well-being of our country. We have the duty, we have the duty and responsibility to uphold the values, to develop and nurture the depth of justice, and to be standing for justice. The Quran is very, very clear that your point in time is the fact that we must be able to rally around that which is good for society, build upon the well-being of community and society, and justice is central in all of that. The aspects relating to keeping people in leadership and including faith community leadership to account is fundamental. People, no one has the right to breach laws, to go above the law. No one has the right to venture into a pathway where we think that I am a law on my own self. We are all to be law-abiding citizens. But having said that, you know, to carry in our hearts the true spirit for humanity and to be touched by what we experience on the ground and to be able to say, how do we take small steps in making those particular differences? The inequalities, how do we bring it back to a point of lowering those particular levels of inequality? I spend the best of my past 2 days in an area here in the Western Cape where it is glaring in terms of what have been pushed into one specific area in terms of probably budget and safety and security, and probably a higher alert of SEP's presence. We don't see that in our African communities, in our African townships. So there's a need to restart the discussion, to refocus, and to be able to say, we need to bring back an open forum where politicians and faith leaders, when we think in terms of the TRC, and be able to say, how do we bring back a platform of we are all equal in front of the law? And let us sit around the table and have a frank discussion. If we need to call upon the likes of a faith leader to facilitate a discussion, to be saying that, listen, we're bringing the politicians and we're summoning all and each and every one of them and the faith leaders and people in authority, we bring them around the table and be able to say, this is the reality of South Africa. And move away from a party political perspective. Speak about what really happens on the ground. and then be able to say where and how can we be able to, as a collective, and Islam, we call that mashura, call for that particular consultation and be able to say, people, this is where we are. How do we, irrespective what our political alliances and associations be, we have a duty and responsibility to take care of the mama that is elderly and sickly. How do we take care of the orphans in our community and society? How do we take care of the vulnerable in our community and society, the disabled people in our community and society? How do we bring back that we reach out as a collective leadership to those who are appealing to say that, listen, that's, you know, that social fatigue that you're talking about, or the apathy. It is almost that people are saying, yeah, no, we need to create an energized community that can be able to keep us to account.
Wow. Mr. Mashaba, we are almost out of time. I'm almost out of breath, just, you know, digesting all of the wisdom that has been shared by Moulana Khaliq. Your final remarks?
You know, Lerato, let me first of all thank to Moulana and the Muslim community to give you the wisdom, firstly, to put you as a leader of a community. And secondly, for allowing you to be here with us this evening to share this with South Africans, because what we are sharing here this evening, we're not only sharing it with the Muslim community, we're sharing it with South Africans, because that is what we are. South Africa is a rainbow nation, is a multicultural society with diverse backgrounds, diverse religious backgrounds, believers and non-believers. But one thing as South Africans, the South Africa that I know was born in 1994 is that we were meant to coexist. Unfortunately, we veered off the road somewhere along the line. But I think this is the time for us to really bring back this train back on track. And I think really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us. Next week, we'll be hosting the leadership of the Hindu community. As you're aware, last week we had also another fantastic event with the Christian, and we are going to be engaging with our Jewish community as well. And this is what South Africa is all about. I've had an opportunity over the years, long before apartheid was destroyed and disseminated, to really have friends and family in all communities, be Muslim community, be Hindu, Jewish, and everyone else. And I think, you know, for me, it is my wish to see this being realized. And it's not something that we can realize overnight. It's something that's going to take us time. It's going to take us 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And I think this is the beginning of that process. And we really want to thank you so much, very much, for helping us put together this foundation so that future generations can benefit out of the work that we are doing. Thank you so much from my side.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much to both of you, I have to say, for this very insightful conversation around the idea and the concept of ethical leadership, particularly from the Muslim faith perspective. We're very glad, Moulana, to have had you with us here this evening. Well, there you have it, South Africa. If I can just sum up the characteristics of an ethical leader that, you know, Moulana shared with us this evening. And I think all of us can agree that we need leaders who are humble. So humility is important for people who are going to lead us. It is a fine line between confidence and arrogance. We know this. We need leaders who are humble. We need leaders who are open, leaders who are not making decisions about our lives in their secret places. We need leaders who can take us with them on the journey toward those decisions that they take on our behalf as society. So we need leaders who are open. We need leaders who are just, leaders who think about us before they think about themselves. Leaders who are selfless. We need leaders, South Africa, who subscribe to the idea of frankness. Tell us the truth, even if it is bad, we can take it. Be frank with us. Take us on the journey once again so that we can build the kind of society that we all would love to live in. Leaders who are accountable, first to themselves. In last week's conversation, the Reverend shared with us to say, before you can lead other people, be sure that you can lead yourself. Be an accountable person first. In this case, we're talking in the case of the Islamic faith, that you are accountable first to Allah. Then you are accountable to yourself, and then you are accountable to society. Accountability is key. And lastly, South Africa, I want to remind you that the idea of accountability really rests with us as the citizenry. It is not only left at the time when we are to mark our access at the ballot. It is for us to police service delivery. It is for us to police what our leaders are doing behind closed doors. Sometimes we can see them. Let us blow the whistle. Let us use the democratic systems and tools that are at our disposal to make sure that all of us play a part in creating the society that we want. And finally, South Africa, this process is a beautiful process. It is a process that is going to take us back onto the drawing board, back to a talking people, a dialoguing people, so that we can all decide at the end of the day that if in fact you are going to lead us, Mr. Mashaba, these are the qualities that you are going to have to exercise. Train yourself to be open. Train yourself to be humble. Train yourself to be frank. Train yourself and remind yourself that at the end of the day, you are a servant and a servant of the people. Thank you so much to all of our viewers. As Mr. Mashaba alluded to, next week, please do join us for our conversation with leaders of the Hindu faith, another very important part of our society as South Africans. I want to thank you both, Mr. Mashaba and Moulana, for being such wonderful guests, and you, South Africa, for always being part of us